America's defense industry operates on a blueprint refined over 2 centuries, one where conflict becomes commerce and national security transforms into shareholder value. When you examine the financial records spanning from the Revolutionary War to Afghanistan, a striking consistency emerges. The same corporate lineages appear in every major conflict, their balance sheets swelling as battle lines are drawn. This isn't hidden in classified documents or whispered about in conspiracy circles. Every contract sits in public archives. Every profit margin is filed with regulators. Every transaction is documented by the very government agencies that approve them. Consider the mathematics of modern warfare through a purely financial lens. In the past decade alone, defense spending has channeled hundreds of billions to a concentrated group of corporations whose executives sit on boards, whose lobbyists walk congressional halls, whose factories strategically dot the electoral map of America. These companies don't simply respond to conflict. They exist in a permanent state of readiness for it, their entire business model predicated on the inevitability of armed engagement. The profit doesn't come from innovation or efficiency. It comes from positioning, from relationships built over generations, from understanding that when nations mobilize, certain corporations always win. The explosives business in America began not with war, but with westward expansion. When a French chemist named Éleuthère Irénée DuPont arrived in 1800, he recognized an economic reality that most missed. A young nation pushing boundaries would need gunpowder constantly, not just for military campaigns, but for mining, construction, and settlement. He built his mills along Delaware's Brandywine River, close enough to power centers to be convenient, far enough from population centers that accidental explosions wouldn't create political scandals. Within 12 years, his company held its first military contract. That initial arrangement during the War of 1812 established a template that would generate wealth for 6 generations. Every subsequent conflict reinforced the pattern. The Mexican-American War brought contracts worth millions in contemporary dollars. The Civil War transformed the operation from successful enterprise to industrial juggernaut. Union forces consumed gunpowder at unprecedented rates, and DuPont's facilities ran continuously for 4 years. They delivered over 4 million pounds of explosives, contracts valued at what would be $300 million today. The fascinating detail wasn't just the volume, it was the cold calculation behind it. Family members held sympathies with both sides of the conflict, yet every pound of gunpowder went to the Union because that's where payment was guaranteed. Political conviction bowed to fiscal reality. World War I represented the true transformation. Before America entered in 1917, DuPont supplied Britain and France with massive quantities of explosives. When American forces joined, production scaled exponentially. New facilities, thousands of workers, production lines that never stopped. The company supplied 40% of all Allied explosives. Their net earnings in 1914 stood at $5 million. 4 years later, that figure reached $82 million, an increase of 1,600%. In today's currency, that's over $1 billion in profit from a single war. After the armistice, those profits didn't vanish into dividends. They funded diversification into chemicals, plastics, synthetic materials, transforming war earnings into a peacetime empire while maintaining military supply contracts for every subsequent conflict. The oil monopoly emerged from different circumstances, but followed similar logic. When John Rockefeller consolidated 90% of American refining capacity by 1880, he created more than a business dominance. He established control over a resource that modern militaries absolutely require. The Spanish-American War was brief but revelatory. As the Navy transitioned from coal to oil-powered vessels, Standard Oil became strategically indispensable. That conflict lasted months, yet it demonstrated that controlling fuel meant controlling military capability. Rockefeller understood the leverage this provided, and he exploited it for generations. World War I proved oil's decisive nature in industrial warfare. Tanks, aircraft, naval vessels, supply trucks, all consumed petroleum products at extraordinary rates. Although antitrust action had technically broken Standard Oil in 1911, the successor companies remained Rockefeller-controlled. Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, they all supplied Allied forces with fuel worth hundreds of millions. The truly remarkable aspect was how Rockefeller entities managed both sides. German subsidiaries sold fuel to German forces. Through neutral intermediaries, Rockefeller companies traded with both warring parties. This wasn't treason in legal terms. The corporate structures were separate enough to maintain plausible deniability. It was simply business conducted on a scale that transcended national allegiance. The Second World War revealed the full extent of this approach. Rockefeller companies held exclusive military fuel contracts with cost-plus pricing, meaning every expense was covered, plus guaranteed margins. Standard Oil of New Jersey faced investigation for sharing synthetic rubber patents with IG Farben, the German chemical conglomerate, technology that extended Germany's war-making capacity. Senator Harry Truman led the investigation and concluded that Standard Oil's actions had damaged Allied war efforts, yet no prosecutions followed. The military's fuel dependency made the company untouchable. The investigation quietly dissolved, contracts continued flowing, and profits accumulated. Banking presents a different angle on war profiteering because wars require capital before they require ammunition. J.P. Morgan understood that governments at war will borrow at any interest rate because the alternative is defeat. His banking empire, established in the 1870s, became the dominant force in American finance by 1900. When the Spanish-American War required funding, Morgan provided loans that were small in scale but critical in establishing governmental trust. That relationship became the foundation for far larger transactions. World War I transformed war financing into an art form. America remained officially neutral until 1917, but Morgan banks extended over $2 billion in loans to Britain and France between 1914 and 1917. In contemporary terms, that's $50 billion. Allied forces used these funds to purchase weapons, food, and supplies, much of it from American companies. The money circulated through the economy, but profits accumulated at both ends, with the lenders and the suppliers. Here's where the financial architecture becomes fascinating. By 1917, Britain and France owed American banks so much that their defeat would have triggered a financial crisis in America. If they lost, they couldn't repay. American banks would fail. The economy would collapse. When President Wilson requested a war declaration in April 1917, the decision wasn't purely about German aggression or democratic principles. It was about protecting American financial stability. Senator George Norris stated it explicitly during congressional debates, claiming America was entering war at the command of gold, that the dollar sign was being placed on the flag. He voted against entry, but Congress voted for it, and Morgan's loans were secured by American military power. After the war, Morgan profited again through the reparations structure. Germany owed the Allies owed America, and Morgan arranged loans that let Germany pay reparations, which the Allies used for American debt repayment. Morgan collected fees at every transaction layer. The Dawes Plan in 1924 and the Young Plan in 1929, both structured by Morgan bankers, refinanced billions in war debt with millions in fees flowing to the bank. Aviation warfare created yet another profit stream, one that has compounded for over a century. The Lougheed brothers, later spelled Lockheed, founded their aircraft company in 1912. World War I brought limited military contracts, mostly experimental designs, but it established crucial relationships. After the war, military aviation contracts evaporated and most aircraft companies collapsed. Lockheed survived by building civilian planes while maintaining Pentagon connections. World War II was their breakthrough. Aircraft became decisive weapons. Lockheed built over 10,000 P-38 Lightning fighters and thousands of Hudson bombers. The contracts were worth hundreds of millions, but the real innovation wasn't aeronautical, it was political. Lockheed didn't just build aircraft, they built institutional dependencies. They hired retired military officers as executives, creating revolving door relationships. They strategically located factories in congressional districts, where representatives needed job numbers for constituents. They made themselves politically impossible to oppose. After World War II, the Cold War ensured continuous contracts. The U-2 spy plane, the SR-71 Blackbird, the C-130 cargo plane still flying today, each generation brought new programs. Lockheed's strategy remained consistent: build adequate products, dramatically underestimate costs to win contracts, then return for additional funding because projects proved more complex than projected. The Pentagon always paid because canceling meant admitting waste. The C-5 Galaxy transport exemplifies this perfectly. The initial 1965 contract was valued at $2 billion. By delivery, actual costs reached $5 billion, 150% over budget. Did Lockheed lose money? Impossible under cost plus contracts. They received all expenses plus profit margins. The Pentagon couldn't cancel because they'd already invested billions. Congress approved the overruns because the factory employed thousands in Georgia, a crucial electoral state. Every subsequent conflict brought more Lockheed contracts. By the 1990s, consolidation was reshaping the defense industry. Lockheed merged with Martin Marietta in 1995, creating the world's largest defense contractor. Today, they generate $65 billion in annual revenue, 90% from government contracts. The F-35 fighter represents the culmination of this model. Originally budgeted at $233 billion, current estimates exceed $1.7 trillion. That's trillion with a T, 7 times over the initial projection. Lockheed receives payment for every cost overrun because the Pentagon cannot cancel. Too much has been invested. Too many jobs depend on it. Too many congressional districts rely on program funding. The pattern established over a century continues. War declared, stock prices rise, contracts awarded, costs balloon, government pays, shareholders profit, cycle repeats. Military logistics transformed into sophisticated profit extraction through companies like Halliburton. Founded in 1919 as an oil services company, Halliburton recognized that infrastructure, whether civilian or military, generated reliable revenue. By World War II, they were constructing bases, airfields, and ports for military forces. The pattern was elegant in its simplicity. Military operations require infrastructure urgently. Halliburton possessed expertise and equipment. They received no-bid contracts justified by time constraints. They constructed facilities under cost-plus arrangements, guaranteeing profit regardless of expenses. Financial loss was structurally impossible. Korea brought more base construction contracts. Vietnam scaled the model dramatically. Halliburton, through its Brown and Root subsidiary, built roads, ports, and airfields throughout South Vietnam. Contracts worth billions were awarded without competitive bidding because Brown and Root maintained powerful political connections. George Brown, the subsidiary's founder, was a major donor to Lyndon Johnson, funding much of Johnson's political rise. When Johnson became president, Brown and Root received massive Vietnam infrastructure contracts. The correlation wasn't coincidental, it was transactional. Political donations purchased access, access produced contracts, contracts generated profits that funded more political donations. The Gulf War in 1991 brought Halliburton back to prominence. Dick Cheney, as Secretary of Defense, oversaw contracts for facilities in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. After leaving government, Cheney became Halliburton's CEO in 1995, running the company until 2000 when he became vice president. Then came Iraq and Afghanistan. Halliburton, through subsidiary KBR, received over $40 billion in contracts, no-bid arrangements with cost-plus pricing. They built bases, provided food services, supplied fuel, managed logistics. The costs were astronomical and often fraudulent. Pentagon inspectors found billions in waste and overcharges. Halliburton billed for meals never served, fuel deliveries that never occurred, construction never completed. When questioned, they argued that war zones are chaotic and some waste is inevitable. The government agreed and continued paying. Dick Cheney officially recused himself from Halliburton contract decisions as vice president, yet his former company received more contracts during his tenure than any previous period. From 2003 to 2008, Halliburton's government contracts increased 400%. Their stock price tripled. When Cheney left office in 2009, he still held stock options worth millions. This exemplifies the pattern. Companies hire politicians as executives. Those executives build governmental relationships. Wars start. Relationships convert to contracts. Profits are shared. Politicians retire wealthy. Companies grow richer. Taxpayers fund everything. The pattern across all five isn't just that they profited from war, it's the methodical consistency of how they profited. First, positioned before conflict begins, all five established themselves as essential during peacetime. DuPont built explosive capacity. Rockefeller monopolized refining. Morgan cultivated banking relationships. Lockheed maintained military contracts between wars. Halliburton developed infrastructure expertise. When war arrived, they were ready, while competitors weren't. Second, secure initial contracts. Government urgency eliminates competitive bidding. Companies already positioned receive no-bid contracts justified by national security. Once you hold the first contract, subsequent ones become easier because you're the proven supplier. Third, implement cost-plus pricing. Almost every major war contract since the Civil War used cost-plus structures. Contractors bill all costs plus guaranteed profit percentages. This eliminates risk entirely. If costs overrun, government pays more. If projects extend, contractors earn more profit. The incentive is maximizing costs, not controlling them. Fourth, systematically overrun budgets. Every major weapon system over 50 years has exceeded initial projections. The F-35 is 7 times over, the Zumwalt destroyer 3 times, the littoral combat ship doubled. This isn't incompetence, it's the business model. Underbid to win contracts, then revise estimates upward. Government can't cancel after investing billions, so they pay, and contractors profit from overruns. Fifth, hire the regulators. Retired military officers join defense contractors. Generals who approved Lockheed contracts become Lockheed executives. Admirals overseeing shipbuilding join shipbuilding companies. The revolving door between Pentagon and industry is so institutionalized it has formal names. It ensures those awarding contracts maintain relationships, benefiting them after retirement. Sixth, lobby for more conflict. Defense contractors spend millions on congressional lobbying, campaign donations, think tank funding that produces papers advocating military intervention. The Center for Strategic and International Studies, the American Enterprise Institute, both received defense contractor funding, and both consistently published research supporting military action. When Iraq war authorization was debated in 2002, defense contractors funded organizations producing intelligence reports supporting invasion. They paid for advertisements, hired retired generals for news appearances advocating war. When war was approved, those same contractors received billions in contracts. Did they create the Iraq war? No. But they created an environment where war became more probable, and they profited when it occurred. Seventh, diversify profits. War earnings don't remain in weapons. DuPont used explosive profits to build chemical empires. Rockefeller used oil earnings for banks and real estate. Morgan used war lending profits to finance peacetime industries. Companies diversify so that even when wars end, accumulated wealth remains, and the families behind these companies become multi-generational dynasties built on conflict. The financial scale is staggering. DuPont's total military contract revenue since 1802 exceeds $50 billion in inflation-adjusted dollars. Rockefeller companies have sold over $100 billion in military fuel since 1898. Morgan banks have collected over $75 billion in interest and fees from war financing. Lockheed Martin and predecessors have received over $200 billion in aircraft and systems contracts since 1917. Halliburton has earned over $60 billion in logistics and infrastructure since 1942. Combined, these 5 companies have extracted over $485 billion from American taxpayers through documented war contracts. The figure excludes indirect profits, stock appreciation, real estate purchased with war earnings, industries built using war capital. Including those factors, the total exceeds $1 trillion. That money came from taxpayers. Every dollar paid to DuPont for explosives was extracted from American workers through taxation. Every dollar paid to Halliburton for logistics came from deficit spending that future generations will repay. These aren't normal market profits from competitive enterprise. These are public funds transferred to private accounts justified by warfare. The question becomes whether this pattern continues today. The answer is unequivocally yes. In 2023, the military budget reached $816 billion. The 5 largest defense contractors received over $200 billion in contracts, representing 25% of the entire defense budget, flowing to 5 companies. The pattern persists unchanged. These companies employ former Pentagon officials. They lobby Congress intensively. They locate facilities strategically. The F-35 program has suppliers in 45 states. That's intentional design. It means 90 senators have constituents employed by the program. Voting against the F-35 means voting against jobs in your state. Congress continues funding despite being 7 times over budget, years behind schedule, with over 800 documented defects. The pattern established by DuPont in 1802 operates today. War is profitable for corporations, shareholders, executives, politicians, receiving donations, and post-retirement positions. The only parties not profiting are soldiers who fight and taxpayers who fund everything. Consider the opportunity cost. What America could have built with $485 billion if it hadn't channeled into war profits. That sum could fund free college for every American student for 20 years, build high-speed rail connecting every major city, fund universal health care for a decade, rebuild every bridge and road nationwide, fund cancer research for a century. Instead, it purchased explosives, fuel, weapons, and logistics for wars, some necessary, many not. Companies profited while public welfare suffered. This isn't debating whether specific wars were justified. World War II was necessary, but even necessary wars were exploited for maximum profit. Many wars were encouraged, prolonged, or escalated because doing so was profitable. Vietnam could have ended years earlier, but defense contractors lobbied for continuation. Iraq was sold on false intelligence, partly produced by contractor-funded think tanks. Afghanistan became a 20-year occupation, partly because contractors made billions rebuilding what was destroyed. The profit motive didn't create these wars, but it made them longer and more expensive than strategically necessary. The final element is that these entities are untouchable. Despite evidence of overcharging, fraud, and profiteering, no one faces prosecution. DuPont was investigated for explosive monopoly practices in the 1930s. Nothing happened. Standard Oil was broken for monopoly violations, but Rockefellers kept the wealth and companies eventually reunited. Morgan banks were investigated for war profiteering after World War I. No prosecutions followed. Halliburton was investigated for overcharging in Iraq. They paid fines, kept contracts, continued profiting. Lockheed was investigated for bribing foreign officials to secure weapons purchases. They paid fines. Executives faced no jail time. The pattern is invariable. Investigations find wrongdoing. Fines are paid as fractions of profits. No individuals are prosecuted. Companies continue operating. The pattern persists because these companies are too critical to prosecute. The military depends on them. Congress depends on them for district employment. The economy depends on their activity. They're protected even when breaking laws. 5 corporate lineages, 150 years, every major American conflict. The pattern is identical every time. Position before war, secure contracts, overrun costs, hire regulators, lobby for more conflict, profit while others die. This isn't conspiracy theory, it's documented history. Contracts are public record, profits are filed with regulators. The pattern is undeniable and currently operational. The only question is whether intervention will occur. History suggests it won't because companies are too powerful, politicians are too dependent, the public is too distracted. If this changes how you view military spending, if you now understand that war functions as a business model, you're beginning to see the actual pattern. 5 dynasties, billions in profit, built on wars that killed millions.